So the fear of humiliation has a stupid grip on me. But am I unusual, or is this a private terror in everyone's lives? It was when I was researching this question, I came across the psychiatrist, James Gilligan. And I want to end with this. I started with Robert Hare, who believed that the solution to the greatest mysteries of all was psychopathy, corporate psychopathy, trickling down to rule the world. But James Gilligan has a different solution to the greatest mysteries of all. James Gilligan was once asked to solve a terrible mystery. This was 35 years ago. James was a young psychiatrist at the Harvard Medical School, totally uninterested in the fact that prisoners across my state were getting killed, he told me. Officers were getting killed. Visitors were getting killed. The Massachusetts prison system was completely out of control during the entire decade of the 1970s. There was a murder a month in one prison alone, and a suicide every 6 weeks. In prisons across the state, inmates were blinding themselves and castrating themselves and swallowing razor blades and so on. They were doing it to themselves and also to each other. A US District Court judge ordered the Department of Corrections to make sense of the chaos, so they asked James to go inside to interview the prisoners. James said it was really surprising because the inmates, once they'd relaxed around him, all said exactly the same thing. Every prisoner was giving James an identical explanation for the spiral of violence inside the prisons. The men would tell me that they had died, James said. These were the most incorrigibly violent characters, and they would all say that they themselves had died before they started killing other people. What they meant was that their personalities had died. They felt dead inside. They had no capacity for feelings, no emotional feelings or even physical feelings. So some would cut themselves or they would mutilate themselves in the most horrible ways, not because they felt guilty. This wasn't a penance for their sins, but because they wanted to see if they had feelings. They found their inner numbness more tormenting than even the physical pain would be. And what was the thing they said had killed them, I asked. Shame, James said. Every prisoner said the same thing, I asked. Every single one, James said. Somebody, often a corrections officer, had publicly shamed them, and it was one public shaming too many, and that's what did it. At Walpole Prison, officers would intentionally flood the cells and put insects in the prisoners' food. They'd force inmates to lie face down before they were allowed meals. Sometimes an officer would tell a prisoner he had a visitor. Prisoners almost never got visitors, so it was an exciting thing to hear. The inmate would quickly get ready. Then the officer would say he didn't really have a visitor and he was just kidding. They thought these things would be the ways to get them to obey, James said, but of course it did the exact opposite. It stimulated violence. So James conceived the greatest dehumiliation exercise of them all, a prison education program. Inmates would regain their self-esteem by working towards a college degree. He gave a speech about it at Harvard. It was a rallying call for lecturers to donate their time for free. The state governor was asked about the idea in a press conference a few days later. He said, "We have to stop this idea of giving free college education to inmates. Otherwise, people who are too poor to go to college are going to start committing crimes just so they can get sent to prison for a free education." And so that was the end of the education program. Thank you.